everything ends eventually. And it doesn't always mean something bad. In March this year, Valve announced Counter-Strike 2 and released a beta test. They also announced that there would be only one major this year, in Paris. The realization that the Blast Paris major was the last CSGO major came as a surprise. It's obvious that regardless of the results or the quality of the event, this tournament will become more important in history than many other majors, perhaps even the most important one. People will definitely remember and write about it in 10 years from now. But do you remember what was the first major like? It's not for no reason that people say that you remember best what was in the beginning and at the end. First love and last, first word and farewell, first attempt and last chance. So let's go back 10 years and recall what the first CSGO major was like. This is FarmSkins. Enjoy watching. Friends, don't forget that we have an updated game store section. This week and next week, you will have access to limited edition cases in the theme of Mag 2 The Trench. Dive into the deep end with FarmSkins and catch bigger fish. And remember, drop is better than from Gaben. On August 14, 2013, a year after the CSGO release, a historic update came out. It was called Arms Deal. It added the M4A1S and USP-S, which of source is important for the game but not for us recalling the first major. That was the day weapon skins appeared in CSGO, 10 collections and 2 cases, the CSGO weapon case and the esports case 2013. From the name of the later box, it's clear that it's somehow related to esports. But how exactly? Valve announced that part of the revenue from sales of the keys for this case would go towards prize pools for tournaments. It wasn't specified which tournaments exactly, but this was the first hint of something big in CS esports. At the time, top championships awarded maximum $50,000, while in Dota 2, with their international, the prize pools were 60 times bigger. A month after the Arms Deal release, Valve revealed the fate of the money made from the case. The company announced that Dreamhack Winter 2013 would have a record $250,000 prize pool in CS history, and part of that money was collected by the community. Dreamhack and Junk Open Sweden would have happened without Valve's involvement. It was a planned event as a part of the annual gaming festival, and similar events happen quite often. But with Valve's arrival, everything changed. This tournament was chosen to be made special, to be made a major. Though the term major wasn't even used yet, even Valve in their announcements wrote the biggest CS tournament in history. To attract maximum attention to the major, Valve introduced souvenir packages. They dropped from watching matches. You just had to link your Steam account to Twitch. But while a subsequent major is a package dropped with the map the viewer was watching, at the first major it was a package with all 10 collections from Arms Deal. It's the only container in the game that doesn't have an opening animation. A 5-second countdown appears on the screen and then it just shows the dropped skin. You could watch matches not only on Twitch but directly in-game, via GoTV. It attracted new viewers who didn't care about esports initially. They would log into the game, see a broadcast was on, click it, and stay. Now there are certain requirements for majors and other top tournaments. Top-notch production, adequate format, high-quality conditions for players, and so on. But DH Winter 2013 only differed from other tournaments by its prize pool. Everything else was the same as everywhere. What was the format of the first major? 16 teams were divided into 4 groups. You need 2 wins to advance. Lose 2 matches, you go home. All games at this stage were best of 1. Sounds crazy, but it was normal back then. But how were the teams selected for this very first major determined? There was no HLTV ranking, no proper qualifying system either. It was decided that 6 slots would go to winners of relatively big tournaments. Funny, 4 such tournaments happened even before the major was announced. That is, teams qualified for the biggest championship in CS history without even knowing about it. Another 6 slots were invites. The strongest teams from each region were invited. The fate of the remaining 2 slots was decided by an online qualifier. Yes, just like that. Through online qualifiers for a $250,000 tournament. Up until the semifinals, in these qualifiers, all matches were played in Bow-1 format. The final 2 slots were contested in a bring-your-own-computer format directly in Jönköping on the first day of the major, November 28th. When 2 teams had already been eliminated from each of the 2 groups, the BYOC qualifier was in full swing and finished at around 5 a.m. That is, the final participant list was only determined as the event went on. NIP and Complexity were playing their quarterfinal, when matches in Group C and D hadn't even started yet. Such was the chaotic non-format. The map pool had 5 maps: Inferno, Dust 2, Mirage, Train, and Nuke. Inferno was extremely popular. It was played a total of 19 times, just 2 times fewer than all other maps combined. What was the atmosphere like? There was no special atmosphere. Again, DH Winter 2013 was part of the annual festival at Elmia Convention Center. That building is a hangar, where it is freezing cold. Many players wore hoodies under their jerseys. Some even wore gloves. It was that uncomfortable. Just take a look at the list of the major participants. Almost every single one of them would become a legend in the future. Here's a skinny NBK, without a beard too. He's playing for Very Games, the second best team in the world. Nathan is happy. His team made semis after beating Copenhagen Wolves. Device, Cypex, and Dupree played for them. That trio was already playing together back then. And here's Adrian. He's a player for Astana Dragons, a very promising team with big names. Doran is given an interview after qualifying for playoffs and talks about their quarterfinal opponents, Complexity. He says he doesn't really know how they play, screamed them a couple of times but mostly focused on their own play. This is Hiko. He's playing for those Complexity guys, one of the 2 North American teams at the tournament. Hiko says their Euro bootcamp went very productively. They practiced 13 hours a day, played against all the top teams. Hiko regrets that iBuyPower went out winless. At the same time, the player doesn't feel any extra pressure from the Complexity being the only team from the region left. Here's Pimp, who was unrecognizable 10 years ago, upset because his AN faculty with Kerrigan and Glaive just left the tournament. And this is Heaton, a former pro, Swedish CS legend and ex-NIP manager, overjoyed that his team made the final of their home turf. And they beat Very Games in the semis. Essentially, it was a match for the title of the best team in the world. Back then, everyone thought the Swedes would win this event. The Swedes did win, just not the ones everyone expected. The final of the very first major was a thriller, where the gods of CSGO, NIP, fell. By that point, they were no longer undisputed best in the world. Competitors emerged, but the 5 of the Forest were still considered the main favorites. In the final, they faced off against Fnatic with JW and Flusha. The decisive match for NIP started grandiosely. 12-3 in the first half of Dust 2. But what happened next? Fnatic turned the game around. It was a shock, but on the second map, NIP calmed everyone down and only gave their opponents 6 rounds. It seemed a similar thrashing would happen on the decisive map. But on Train, NIP just didn't get going. Only 2 rounds and helpless play. Fnatic, champions of the first ever CSGO major. Get Right looks at the pantless Devil Walk with the same surprised face that NIP fans watched this final with. It was hard to believe the legendary Swedes could stumble like that. In the future, NIP would get their due as well. They reached the final of 4 more majors in a row, but only win once. Just take a look at the award ceremony at the first major and at the last major. At the first glance, there is not a huge visible difference in development, but looking at a 10-year span, enormous progress is evident to the naked eye. Valve's decision to introduce majors was fateful for CSGO. That's how esports athletes and their audience stayed and believed in the game, and the game itself didn't repeat the fate of CS Source, which didn't appeal to everyone. It did have an esports scene, but CS 1.6 was always the main version of Counter-Strike. DH Winter 2013 was the first time in CS history that Valve got involved in esports. Yes, there was nothing pompous about the event itself, but it turned out special with all its flaws and deficiencies. Already in March 2024, we are expecting the first major in CS2 history. Will it be able to match the success of Dreamhack Winter 2013 and get interest from as many CS fans worldwide as it did 10 years ago? We'll have to wait and see. Friends, thank you for giving us your time. Let us know which major left the biggest impression on you personally. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit that like button so you won't ever miss like Nico did at that PGL Grand Final. See you soon, friends.